Hello. I hope you enjoy this little episode in my series on oil painting with glazes. Oil painting is all about forgiveness. It has to be. You have to forgive yourself a lot of times. You have to forgive yourself for what you do. You have to forgive others. You have to forgive them for what they do. As difficult as it is, and as much as you may have to rework things, it's about forgiveness. I forgive you. What? Okay, all right. Okay, we are going, can you see me? We are going to be working the color that we have let dry now. And when you do scumbles or glazes, sometimes it's a really good idea to let that color underneath dry. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to try to get in here a little bit closer so you can sometimes see me. We are going to mix up our stand oil and our pigment. And we're going to use, in some places, Viridian. Viridian is oftentimes used as the base. So there are still some spots where we want to put a little bit of the base color, the darker color. And paints like Terra Verde, Viridian were used as the base. So this is very expensive. Why? Because I needed it. That's why it's so expensive. So Viridian is very expensive because it is needed for that base. This was like $29. I'm sure you can find it cheaper somewhere. But there was a song, and I used to think that the word in it was Viridian. Have you ever had that happen where there's a song, you think he's singing a certain thing? So the song was something along the lines of, I'm not talking about Viridian, and I don't want to change your life. Well, he wasn't. I think it's England Dan and John Ford Coley who sang it, but they weren't talking about, they didn't say that. The actual words were, I'm not talking about moving in. Well, as soon as I found out what the real words were, I didn't like the song as much anymore. It seemed to have a little mystery. I was like, what is Viridian that he's talking about? That happens to me with a lot of songs. I think it just gets back to my hearing problem. So anyway, we are going to be continuing what we started here. If you remember, I had this dark green grid, which is starting to kind of vanish in the sense that I've gone over it with a light, a white blue, a cobalt blue, mixed with soft mixing white. Now I'm gonna mix the stand oil with my paints, and unfortunately I don't have enough camera here. I will in the future to give you a view of this, but I'm just dabbing into the stand oil, and I am setting it just next to the paint for now. Oh, we got a hair in there. Okay, we don't want to paint the hair in there. Although they found in one of Van Gogh's paintings a grasshopper actually buried in the paint. So he must have been working kind of furiously. So now, there's been talk about, okay, you move from lean to fat, all right? And if it's lean, you're just using the paint, the oil paint, mixed with a little bit of mineral spirits or paint thinner, whichever you prefer. And from there, you could move to just working with just the pigment. And then from there, you move to working with just the pigment, you know, your paint, and the stand oil. So it's getting fatter. You don't want paint drying more slowly to be trapped under paint on top that's drying more quickly. So you wouldn't want to work with a heavier linseed oil or stand oil mix and then go over that with a thin paint that has a lot of mineral spirits in it, because that's going to flash. We used to call that flashing. It dried quickly. Back in the days of caulking and tuck pointing, when I used to tuck point, we would say that it would flash. Okay, it would dry more quickly. Fatter paint with the pigment and the mineral pigment and the linseed oil. You don't want to, that's drying more slowly. You don't want to put the paint with the mineral spirits on top of that, because you're trapping a slow drying paint under a fast drying paint. All right? Here's the problem with that philosophy. And I don't disagree with it. I think it's probably correct. However, the problem with saying that's the way we have to function is you will find that there are some paints, pigments, that just dry faster than others. Okay? So, for example, I went to clean off this palette from the other day. The blue was already getting pretty hard. Okay? This greenish yellow here was still wet, like the day that I had put it down. This golden yellow was kind of dry already. And the point being, they dry at different rates. So this philosophy of, well, we don't want to put the faster drying paint over the slower drying paint. Well, you will find that one of your fastest drying pigments is dark umber, or a dark brown. So that would be like saying you can never paint a dark brown over another color, because you're going to trap a lighter, a slower drying paint under a faster drying paint. Okay, so what are the workarounds for this? The workarounds for this, okay, and we're gonna mix up our permanent rose and our pale rose. We're gonna mix those up and get those mixed up. Okay, you can see I'm mixing that up. I've mixed it a little bit with my mineral spirits. And, you know, I'm sort of like a cook. Yeah, a dash of this, a dash of that. And there are some people that they got to measure it out precisely. And others, you go talk to them and they're like, well, I take a little bit with my fingers and throw a dash of this and then a dash of that. If you've gotten used to what your dash of this and dash of that means, then you can work that way. But if you haven't, then maybe you shouldn't work that way yet, okay? So I have. I'm used to what it means to work with a dash of this and a dash of that. And I don't sit there and measure things out, you know, with a measuring cup or a pipette or something like that. I don't do that. But I have a general idea of how I have mixed that up. Okay. There are people who will think that that's the wrong way to go about it. All right. Now, I mix things up with a backfiller, as I think I have already shown you and told you. So we're mixing our colors up here using a backfiller, and I do some painting with the backfiller, as you know. Okay, I do some painting with the backfiller. And then I like to take these backfillers and wipe them on the canvas that I'm going to be painting with next. Okay, so how do we solve this issue of not being able to... Okay, are you still there? Good, I didn't lose you. Okay, I am going to be painting alongside this country road. I'm going to be painting a bit of a little stone post, okay? We're going to have us a little stone post. That little stone post. And we're putting the Viridian down there, okay? We're putting down the Viridian. We're making our little stone post. Those birds are getting awfully loud, aren't they? Okay. And we're going to take a tiny little, narrow little brush, and our stone post is going to have a little round top on it. Okay. I already don't like that. Have you ever had that happen? You start painting and you say, I already don't like that. And I don't. which means I'm going to have to go in here and do more repair, but that's okay. Okay, so we got our little, it's a stone post with a little round ball on the top of it, and we're accomplishing a couple things by doing this. We're creating a demarcation for where we're going downhill towards the little house, which we see the top of, and we got the tavern here, which is down the steps. How deep yet, we don't know, but I had to do that because I had to create some perspective as to the scale and size of things. So that's why we're adding these stone posts. One reason is to create some perspective as to the scale and size. Now, let me get back to what I was telling you about the, can you see that? Okay. Let me get back to what I was telling you about going over lean with fat, all right? Okay, let me get back. Now, here's the important thing to remember. If you start painting with linseed oil and mineral spirits or paint thinner, and you want to start to go over that with fatter, yes, of course, you're going to do that. You will reduce the mineral spirits, increase the linseed oil. You can work that way, and then you get to a point where you say, I can't go any fatter with this. I still need to add layers. What do I do? And there are a couple solutions to this. And it's similar as if you're working with a paint that dries more quickly, like the dark umber. You've painted with the linseed oil. You've painted with the mineral spirits. You've gone to fatter, okay, as I've done here. This is a little fatter than what was underneath it, all right? Okay, so you now can switch to stand oil. Stand oil is a very fine medium to paint with. Stand oil is a type of linseed oil, my understanding is. And stand oil dries more slowly than linseed oil. Now, if you work with stand oil, you're going to find a couple surprises you got. And the one being, it is not, if you're used to working with your paint and then going the next day and kind of brushing it out a little bit and you like that effect, stand oil is not going to let you do that the next day. You might have to wait 2 days before you can do that. And it doesn't brush out quite the same way like powdered snow. It's gonna brush out a little differently because it's stickier. All right, so you just have to get used to that. So if you're going over your paint with stand oil, it will dry more slowly, and therefore you can go from lean to fat and fatter yet, knowing that the substance on top has a slower drying time. If that made sense to you. Stand oil has a slower drying time. So you can start with linseed oil and your pigment, and then as you go over that, whether you're glazing or not, you can use stand oil, okay? So, and I hope I explained that well. Now, if you have gone from lean to fat and you got no mineral spirits at all in there, and now you're going to stand oil, the question arises, if you're going to do a scumble or a glaze on top of that, and you want to achieve a little depth like I have right here, can you begin to add mineral spirits again? Because it's stand oil. It's slow drying. It is a little fatter than, in my opinion, than linseed oil. But can you again introduce mineral spirits into it? Here's what I do. I let the painting dry for a long time, days, sometimes months. And then there are times I will take a sandpaper, a very fine sandpaper, the kind that will stick to like the back of an orbital sander, and I stick it to my backfiller, and I very gently sand the surface that I want to go over. Now, you have to be aware, if you do that, you've destroyed the effect of the depth that you're achieving by glazing. Because once you put a little sandpaper on there and then you go over it, that depth is gone. The depth is gone, okay? So be aware of that. But oil paints bond physically, not chemically. This is what I was taught. So by using a tiny bit of sandpaper in spots, you're increasing the surface area. You're increasing the pock marks, the surface area, the places where your paint can grab onto. You've gotten rid of that very smooth sheen. You've also gotten rid of all the depth that you've achieved with your glazing, though. So just be aware of that, okay? I hope I explained that well to you. All right, now. Okay. Now we have a little bit of fun. And now I have the color I'm working with is the permanent rose. All right. I've already gone over this with the light rose, I think it was. No, pale rose blush. I'm sorry. Pale rose blush. And I really like the way that blends with the darker blue, with the cobalt. I like the way it blends with the cobalt. It's working for me. Okay. So I think we probably needed, and I'm learning something here from this painting. I need to add a little bit of the cobalt closer to her hands and closer to her body here, so that I can go over it with the, I don't know, can you see that? It's working out very nicely. It's giving us a nice shadow tone, a nice background tone. I hope you can see that, what I'm doing there. So this is a very lovely background tone, and it's kind of important to me because when I came in here with some shadow, it ended up making it look like she's got some fat kind of bulging out. Not that that's a bad thing, but bulging out from her body where her skirt is cinched around her. Well, that's not what I intended for it to look like. So adding a little bit of this rose in there and blending it in with the cobalt is helping to make that demarcation for me that I would like to happen. So I'm real happy with the way that's going. And we're going to take a look and see what's going to happen with the shadows here. Pretty happy with that too. Every now and then we get to be happy. Sometimes I am not happy with what I'm doing, and I got to walk away and then stand and stare at it and say, now what? And I'm working with a very fine brush, you can see. And I do like the way that it blends with the darker cobalt. Okay? It's doing that pretty well. But I'm not nuts about the way it blends with the greenish tint. But I guess you can't have everything. Okay, that's working. Okay, and I have switched from a little tiny spotter brush to the round. And this country road is moving on delicately into the past, which is what we want. Remember, we put the grid underneath. It's still there. Just kind of in the past. And here we get to show up that granite for what it is. It is a combination of feldspar, clay, and hard baked crystalline quartz. Granite is the most abundant mineral on the planet. No, it's not. Granite is the hardest mineral in abundance. So we're going to show up that granite for what it is. I'm not going to use the obvious joke. You see where the color I really was looking for is starting to materialize for me. And that is the sort of dark red purplish of granite. There's immature granite and mature granite. Mature granite means that a lot of the feldspar has been washed out and you're starting to see more of the gray and the black and the white, which we're going to end up doing that here. So really at this point, I kind of lied to you. It's more the immature granite we're seeing at this point. So we're seeing the dark red, the feldspar of the immature granite. Granite is the hardest mineral in abundance. In abundance. And there's immature granite and mature granite. And the immature granite, see, we're getting a little reckless here, but that's okay. I wanted to get a little bit reckless. Got to do that. Got to get a little bit reckless in your painting. Okay. So anyway, immature granite has got a lot of feldspar clay in it. It hasn't been washed out yet by streams and waters and snows. And mature granite is more of a gray and black, because gray, black, and silver, because the feldspar clay has been washed out of it. You tend to find mature granite more downstream, and you can figure out why that would be. It's just as I said. Oil painting is all about forgiveness. You figured it out, right? Get you to stay there.